Good afternoon and thanks for staying with us here on this special broadcast on the Union Budget Announcement Day as we help break down the budget for you and tell you how it impacts you, your life, your lifestyle. Essentially, this is a budget one hopes will pave way for a new India after the worst kind of year that we've had, an unprecedented year of a pandemic, a lockdown and recession. Here is the government starting afresh with a budget that focuses on some of the sectors that really matter, be it the healthcare sector, be it the infrastructure sector that will then lead to more jobs creation, or even the farm sector. There has been absolutely no big significant change to the income tax slabs. Fine print may show if your overall outgo may go a little up or a little down, but there is no big relief coming in as far as income tax is concerned. The government's biggest focus has been on spending money so that you can revive the economy. Where will the money come from? Well, we don't know what the revenue collection estimates are. A deeper look at the financial document and the budget document will tell us about that. But there is a divestment figure of 1.7 lakh crore rupees. The government says they're going to sell stakes in a lot of state-owned companies, which will be identified by the Niti Aayog. They're also looking at the listing of the insurance giant, the LIC. Air India has been on cards for the longest time. We wait and watch to see how much of it is done. These are broadly the headlines. We also know that there is an agri-cess that has been put on fuel, but the government claims it will not impact you directly because this is just replacing some of the other duties that existed. So the final fuel price won't change, at least from the central government's end. That's the claim. We're also looking at the fine print to tell you whether or not this agri-cess gets implemented for other products, for other consumer products and food products or services that you may be using, and if that will actually impact your monthly kharcha. Some of these are the big takeaways. We've also got our panelists joining us to get you a detailed insight into what this budget means. Let me first go across to Mr. Nitin Khanna, CFO of Inorbit Malls. Mr. Khanna, what is the sense for retail and real estate industry? Does this budget help in creation of demand?
So, good afternoon. I think it's a directional budget. We'll talk about more about talks about strategic. I won't say it's a tactical budget. I don't see a direct money, coming in the hands of consumers as of now. Few of the segments, and you talk about retail and real estate. So let me first talk about retail. I see mobiles, the imported mobiles definitely, going up because of changes in the import duty. I could see gold and silver, the removal of the custom duties. Probably we might get an upside on that part of the retail. Cotton and silk, again, there is a huge thrust on the Atmanirbhar India. And that's something which we are looking at probably might go upside. But overall, I think MSME products, they are withdrawing quite a few exemptions. We need to see the fine print coming here. Boost in terms of real estate, I think affordable housing, they have increased by 1 year, the tax exemption, even the tax holidays for the real estate companies. I think that's really good. On the REIT part, the finance minister did announce, some of the incentives. We have to see the fine print coming in. Big boost in the infrastructure spending. I'm sure it takes down more on the execution bit. We have to see, how the execution of these projects come in so that, the money in the hands of consumers might be high. So it's just a directional budget. It's not a very tactical budget. It doesn't give any direct money as of now in the hands of immediate consumer. From a super rich perspective, I think we were all expecting a COVID cess that probably you can say indirectly there is an increase in income. Otherwise, I don't see a serious efforts in terms of middle class or a super rich class, getting a higher income in their hands.
So there was also an announcement about extending the tax holiday on affordable housing by another year. Now, to what extent has that kind of a step worked and helped the industry? Will that really bring in any additional benefit?
Yes, that's it. Means, we have to see the fine print. We were expecting a little higher amount. This is a 1.5 lakh deduction. It's just a carry forward. We were expecting a higher amount to, get added over there. That's something which is, we were expecting. It would have given an immediate boost on that part. I think in the recent past there were a little bit of savings which have been announced by the state governments on on the registration and stamp duty, which has helped the residential part in the real estate to boom in the last quarter. But a direct benefit, huge benefit. I won't call it a huge benefit. Yeah.
Okay, my last question before I let you go, Mr. Khanna. A lot of your business actually depends on how many people are walking into the stores in your malls, which means how many people actually have some more money to spend. In a pandemic time, most people have resorted to online shopping rather than offline shopping. Do you see that changing, and do you see any of the government steps really helping bringing in more customers to your malls?
I think we have in the last quarter, from a footfall perspective, we are already at 70% plus. If you see quarter on quarter, improvement, there has been a drastic improvement with the two vaccinations, drive coming in. I think after June we will be back to normal. On the impact of online, definitely there has been a shift of the consumers. But as you see, as we are coming out from the pandemic, there has been a lockdown. People want to go out, spend time, and malls are not only a place of consumption. There's also a place of entertainment as of now. So we see a lot of the entire F&B segment, and with multiplex now the restrictions going off, we directly see we see that there is a direct impact which is coming in the next quarter with new movies also coming getting released in March onwards. We see the first quarter coming back to normal. That's our best estimates of now. Keeping my fingers crossed on any COVID second wave or God forbid anything happens in the same area. Yeah.
Yes, the whole nation is keeping their fingers crossed that doesn't take place at all, and we can now finally move on to the next phase in New India, and with all our efforts to reviving the economy and getting the jobs back. Thank you so much, Nitin Khanna, for joining us and sharing your reactions on this.
Thank you very much.
Let me also say good afternoon to Vishwas Pathak of the BJP, Amarjeet Kaur, National Secretary for the CPI, Ghanshyam Tiwari, spokesperson for the Samajwadi Party, and Mr. Praveen Jha, Professor of Social Science, Economics and Political Science of JNU, joining us right now. Also saying good afternoon to R. Sriram, Associate Editor of Economic Times, and of course Vinay Tiwari, our Managing Editor, continues to stay with us here in our studios. Mr. Sriram, if I can very quickly come across to you, there wasn't much clarity in terms of the announcement speech itself as far as the government's revenue collections or tax collections estimates are concerned. Any insights that you can now give us, upon reading the budget document, on where the government hopes to get a larger chunk of its money from?
Well, quite a bit of the chunk of money is going to come from borrowing. I think the borrowing figure for next year, that is FY22, if I'm not mistaken, is around 12 lakh crore.
Yes.
And there is going to be a fair bit of borrowing that is going to happen. They've also announced, I think, if I'm not mistaken, an additional borrowing of 80,000 crore for the rest of this financial year.
Yes.
That is the financial year that ends in March. So both for this year and for next year, a lot of the money that is going to be spent and will be spent will come from borrowing. It will come from disinvestment. There is a fairly big, ambitious disinvestment target that has once again been set for FY22. But the difference I suspect in this year is that a lot of the disinvestment proposals or candidates will actually happen, because we're already at a very advanced stage when it comes to Air India. We're at a fairly advanced stage when it comes to BPCL. The bill for LIC is going to be moved in the current session. And so we will have an LIC disinvestment partial stake sale that will happen in the new financial year. And plus the government has also announced that a couple of public sector banks will be privatized and one additional PSU will be privatized, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of the money will come from the disinvestment. Plus one can also see, if you are actually targeting a 11% economic growth for FY22, your tax collections, both the GST tax collections and the personal income tax collections, are going to be direct, and the personal income tax collections are going to be much better than last year. That is the assumption, and that is probably will likely pan out unless and until something dramatic and something really cataclysmic happens. So a lot of the spending is going to be done by borrowing, by disinvestment, by tax collections, and by other measures that the government may want to do from time to time.
So, in fact, to the point that you made, yes, it's a larger borrowing plan. So, the government is going to borrow more so they can spend more because the spending plan is unprecedented this time. But when it comes to the divestment, keeping in mind what we've seen in the last 2-3 years, do you think the process when it comes to the two banks or even LIC can really happen this year itself? I mean, or is that too ambitious?
I think you have to divide the government. When I say the government, the NDA government, right from 2014 onwards, their track record on privatization and disinvestment into two broad categories. The first category is the period from 2014 to 19, when probably very little of a substantive note was done. There was some buyback, there was some partial disinvestment, like 5-10% here and there in Coal India and a couple of other things, but there was no big major privatization that happened in this period. I think the pace started really quickening after the NDA was voted to power again in 2019. Then we had a bit of a setback with Air India, where I think they initially went with a bit of a tentative plan of, say, 75% with government holding some kind of a control, and then they later had to change tack because there was very poor investor response. But from FY20 onwards, or FY20, FY21, that is this financial year onwards, there has been a very determined attempt to push through privatization as much as possible. Unfortunately, nothing could happen last year because we lost some 4-5 months because of COVID and people couldn't travel and all that. I think we are on the last leg of, to answer your question about whether we are hopeful of something happening in FY22, my answer would be yes, because we are on the last leg of privatization of Air India. And from all accounts, they are very, very determined to get this done, maybe this financial year itself. We are fairly at an advanced stage when it comes to BPCL. So that could also happen, maybe not in this financial year, but in the coming financial year. And as far as the two public sector banks are concerned, you need to change the act. So nothing is going to happen in the next 4-5 months.
Yes.
First, the bill needs to be amended. So that will happen probably in the budget session. And once the budget session ends, look, this is a great time to do privatization, right? I mean, the markets are buoyant, given what you're seeing in the markets today. And if they continue for at least 6-8 months of the year, the markets are buoyant, and there is going to be a fair bit of investor activity in India. There is going to be a fair bit of foreign investment activity in India. We've seen how they have reacted, how they have responded in the last 1 year. So if you really want to do your big bang privatization, you got to do it in the next 7, 8, 9 months.
Yes, in fact, one would have thought that some of it could have happened in the last couple of months when the market zoomed to levels like 50,000, but that didn't.
Yes. Yeah, but some of these things are very, very complex, right?
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, BPCL, you're not going to get anything done until somebody comes here and sees the plant, and it's an old plant. There are legacy issues involved in this. You
Absolutely.
do a proper due diligence. And I don't know whether all these things was possible in the last, say, few months of the year, or maybe it'll happen now.
So let's see, in fact, what Niti Aayog draws up as a list and what they finally look at, putting on the block in terms of selling. But I'm just reading a comment that's also been made by the former member of the PMEAC, Ratin Roy, who says the most transparent budget speech on macro fiscal numbers in a long, long time. And then he's put emoticons of clapping hands. Would you agree, Mr. Praveen Jha, that in comparison to maybe last year, at least there is some clarity when it comes to overall numbers that the maths that the government has put together?
No, the most important thing is that things which were sort of done in an off-budget manner through public sector borrowing, etc., it has been proposed that it will not be done, right? So that indeed is a good thing, okay? Now, whether everything else in terms of sort of playing with numbers will disappear, that we do not know. Essentially, what Mr. Ratin Roy is alluding to, it is, if I understand him correctly, it is this particular aspect. Because, you see, if you look at the estimates of fiscal deficit, just look at the writings in the last 3-4 months, economists tell you that it ranges from for the last year, from 7-8% to 15% or so, right? Now, why does that happen? It is precisely because of this statistical chicanery, right? So if at least one important part of that has been promised to be done away with, that is a very good thing. Beyond that, transparency, etc., I would certainly not agree with Rathin. There is so much there which is, not only in the fine print, but actually beyond the fine print.
Yes.
We say a hell of a lot in terms of, for instance, infrastructure. There is a lot of enthusiasm amongst some of our panelists about how this is going to address very, very important needs. But you can say anything and then not do anything. Right? In terms of lots of these promises. Isn't that lack of transparency and so on? Isn't that lack of accountability and so on? Right? We have seen this happen year after year with respect to infrastructure promises. Year after year. Just look at what the promises were, what the investments were, what actual expenditure were, and so on. Right? Because many of these numbers are based on certain kind of optimism, certain kinds of situations which can create those promises to be fulfilled. Now, if that doesn't happen, you fall flat, right? So I think, I do sort of see what Dr. Rathin Roy probably had in mind when he claps for something.
If I may just add to that, I very well remember that last year, once the speech was presented, one of the biggest questions that many of us were asking is, well, all right, and if your fiscal deficit target is, 3.5%, where are you going to get the money from? The economy had already slowed down to about a 4.5%. The tax collections were down and out, and so where are you going to get the money from? And that math for many of the experts was also not adding up. Maybe right now, at least it is to say, okay, there is an admission that this year itself, our fiscal deficit for the current year will be 9.5%. And that is, and we are going to be borrowing a lot more. And for the next year as well, we will borrow a lot more, and it will be 6.8%. So yes, we will spend the money and we will borrow. We are not too hopeful about high tax collections. Maybe that's, one way of looking at it, as that's what Rathin Roy is talking about. Vishwas Pathak, to the point that Praveen Jha was making, at the end of the day, this is still just a statement of intent. It's still a vision document that your government has to implement and thereby see some results being generated.
So look at the intention of this government 2014 onwards. 2014 onwards, Mr. Modi has intended and promised that he wants to take this economy to 5 trillion. So from 2 trillion to 3 trillion, he has already reached, and is going to reach to 5 trillion also. While doing that, in 2014, our budget size was 14 lakhs crore, which is now today more than 30 lakhs crore. Our GDP size was 140 lakhs crore, which is now 210 lakhs crore. Therefore, we cannot doubt the intention. This pandemic situation is something very unprecedented situation, wherein we are going to receive around 12 lakhs crores through direct taxes, 12 lakhs crores through indirect taxes, totaling to 24 lakhs crores, and balance around 8 to 10 lakhs crores will come through disinvestment, sale of assets, and also borrowing. Now look at our debt to GDP ratio. Our debt to GDP ratio is very, very in control as compared to US, Japan, Germany, which is something like 4 times of India. Therefore, we should not be averse of taking loan.
This is what we've been saying all this while. Your government wasn't listening to us. This is what we said all of last year.
Okay, as long as our growth rate, economic growth rate is higher than interest rate, we are in safe zone. That is what economic advisor also advised 2 days before. I think this government for last 6 years, without increasing a single % in direct taxes, on the contrary, increase the slabs, reach from 5 lakhs crores to 12 lakhs crore in 6 years. Indirect taxes also, average rate used to be 24%, which has come down to 18%. This all shows about the fiscal discipline. Therefore, whenever government intends something, rest be assured, it will be assured that way only. Now look at this LIC. It's a very good move because it is not the business of the government to run each and every business. Let it be run by private parties. And through that disinvestment, by making it 74% limit, I think it will achieve a great, to the great extent of 1.75 lakhs crore worth of disinvestment target. I think this budget is very, very balanced, taking care from Kerala to Leh, education to business and industry, agriculture, labor to businessmen, everyone.
Very, very balanced, taking care of states from Kerala to Bengal, Tamil Nadu and Assam. Ghanshyam Tiwari, a budget that also has some stops for the pole-bound states.
It is shocking that in India you present a budget without mentioning the most distressed sections of the country. You do not speak about regional disparities, say Bihar, Orissa, Jharkhand, parts of eastern Uttar Pradesh and overall Uttar Pradesh, which have faced a massive migrant crisis, and there is nothing being offered to those migrants as well as to those states that are facing this migrant crisis. 80% of the students are out of school, online and offline. You have not announced anything for those students, those parents, even those schools. You could have announced digital vouchers, if that is the case, that allows those states and those schools to have at least some appliances and devices so that they can bring back those children to school. Women have faced massive crisis on the domestic front. They are out of the labor force as well. There is no mention on that front. Those who have lost jobs, these people will walk back into the jobs. If this government was serious in enabling those who are in distress because of job losses, and they are in tens of millions, this government would have said that there will be vouchers, whether it is job vouchers or skill vouchers, that will be available for those who lost jobs in the last 1 year. There is nothing they have done to offer poor a relief or poor who has been in distress due to their decisions. As far as the budget itself is concerned, if disinvestment is the big story from this budget, why was that big story not played out last year? Look at the numbers. Did they meet their target from what they announced last year or the year before? We talk about how the numbers add up, and Ratin's comment, this government has said something and done another. You remember that the year they announced Ayushman Bharat, and you look at the numbers today and the budget allocations that they made to Ayushman Bharat. Any big schemes, 20 lakh crore as last year's stimulus by this government was a plain jumla. So for this government, you have to read what is in the fine print and what is beyond. But for me, it is shocking that this government chose not to help those who are in distress, and they are the majority of the poor and the lower middle class in this country, and the regions in distress, which is the poorest states in this country.
Okay, before I move on to our other panelists, let's just quickly listen in to Mr. Amitabh Kant, who's giving a reaction right now on this budget.
बहुत ही प्रोग्रेसिव बजट है, और सबसे बड़ी चीज जो है कि टैक्स को टेम्पर नहीं किया गया है, कोई नए सेसेस नहीं लगाए गए हैं, और ये बहुत बड़ी चीज है.
सर, जॉब एम्प्लॉयमेंट को लेकर इस बजट में क्या देखते हैं?
जॉब तब बढ़ते हैं जबकि ग्रोथ होती है इकोनॉमी में, और ये बजट एक ग्रोथ डायनेमिक बजट है. और जब ग्रोथ होगी और सारे सेक्टर्स बढ़ेंगे तो आप देखिएगा एजुकेशन के थ्रू जॉब्स आएगी, हेल्थ के थ्रू जॉब्स आएगी, और आगे चल के आपके इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर सेक्टर के थ्रू बहुत ज्यादा जॉब्स आएंगी.
सर, फिस्कल डेफिसिट का टारगेट जो है 3.5 से बढ़ा के 9.5% कर दिया गया है. अगले साल के लिए भी इन्होंने टारगेट रखा है 6.8%. उससे क्या लगता है आपको कि इन्फ्लेशन, महंगाई बढ़ सकती है या ब्याज दरें बढ़ेंगी क्या इससे? नहीं,
6.8 देखिए, अभी खर्च नहीं कीजिएगा आप. अब ये समझना जरूरी है कि अभी अगर हम नहीं खर्च करते हैं तो आगे चल के आपके एमएसएमईज को बहुत दिक्कत आएगी, उनको क्रेडिट नहीं मिलेगा. तो अभी खर्च करिए, क्योंकि बाद में आपके पास बहुत ज्यादा एनपीएस हो जाएंगे. तो अभी खर्च करके इन सबको ठीक कीजिए, और ये बहुत जरूरी था इस बजट में करना, और इसीलिए 6.8 मेरे विचार से बिल्कुल ठीक फिस्कल डेफिसिट.
सर, नौकरी पेशा लोग बोल रहे हैं कि इस बजट में हमारे लिए क्या है, वो अभी भी ढूंढने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं. उनको आप बताएंगे कि इस बजट में नौकरी पेशा, गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉयज
के लिए तो बहुत कुछ है. हेल्थ पे है, एजुकेशन पर है, न्यूट्रिशन पर है, और इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर पर है. देश का जब इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर ठीक होगा तो ये सारे के सारे गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉयज को फायदा होगा. तो इन सब के लिए और कोई नया टैक्स गवर्नमेंट एम्प्लॉय पर नहीं लगा है, ये बहुत बड़ी चीज है.
लेकिन सर, कस्टम ड्यूटी कुछ उस पर बढ़ी हुई.
All right, that's of course Mr. Amitabh Kant there talking about this budget and how there is a need to now spend, and the government recognizes that fact and will be doing so. Ghanshyam, quick point from you, and then I have to go across to Amarjeet Kaur as well.
Again, he was at loss to explain how this budget relates to employment.
Yeah.
And that is the problem that this government has. They have a generic answer for any specific question you ask. You take one simple idea. Once the vaccination drive is over, the domestic travel sector will open. That is a place that is there is massive distress. If this government had announced any ability for the consumers to spend on domestic travel in later half of this year, that will create economic activity. But if you don't focus on specifics and you are focus on headlines because you are now losing the faith of even the Modi backers, then you create a budget that will grab the headline, may joy the stock markets, but will not in reality help those who really need your help.
Let me get in a response. In fact, before I take in a response from Vishwas Pathak, let's also get a quick word from Amarjeet Kaur. Amarjeet Kaur, there is also an allegation from the opposition party that there isn't anything for farmers. But there have been announcements when it comes to creating an agricultural market, including infrastructure within the APMCs, and the reforms that the government already announced are any which ways on hold. Is that a fair allegation to make then?
It is a fair allegation, but first of all, I want to say that this budget has been drafted keeping elections in mind, number one. Number two, this is only an extension. This is only an extension of what was being announced by Sitaraman as a package. 20 lakh crore package. It is only extension and further explanation of that only, nothing new comes. Third thing which I want to say is that this disinvestment target which they have fixed up, that itself shows that the government continues to be in selling spree of our national assets, and that is very true when they are saying they are going to disinvest and privatize 2 banks and LIC 49%, it will go to 75%. They are also have not talked about Manrega. We all know that that became a saving feature during lockdown period. Our rural economy, people who lost jobs went to the homes. They could at least depend on that. They are talking of spending in infrastructure.
Yeah.
So builders lobby will be getting a lot out of this. And when you are talking of farmers, they are saying 16.5 lakh crore will be given for loans. So farmers should be told to take more loans and be ready. When not being paid in a capacity to pay back the loans, then continue with their suicide free.
Okay, so just a couple of clarifications, Amarjeet Kaur, on the Manrega allocation fund. Because this year obviously the government had to step it up significantly because of the lockdown. It was 1.1 lakh crore rupees. For next year, the Manrega allocation is 73,000 crore rupees, which is still much higher than what they had announced last February. So that continues. The other thing though you said about not announcing in terms of the jobs. Well, the infrastructure spending, we are hoping will lead to some or the other kind of jobs creation. But let me ask Vishwas Pathak to respond to the issues and points that you've raised.
See, again, these kind of allegations or doubts are always raised against Mr. Modi for last 6 years. But for last 6 years, this country has witnessed our economy jumping from 11th rank to 5th rank. That is the reality. Similarly, from 2 trillion to 3 trillion. And now look at the GST collection. Nobody is going to contribute to the taxes unless he has done some business. The GST collection is now reached to the level of 1,20,000 crores. So what does it mean? It means economy is back to the normal. It is working out. People are getting jobs. Look at the infrastructure, roads, bridges, right up to China. They are there. Farmers are also benefited. During COVID, the way our leadership very decisively led this country and this vaccine drive for all across the world, I think post-corona, this entire economic scenario would be different. India would be looked differently. During corona period also, we have received 60 billion FDI. What does it mean? That means it shows a confidence in the leadership of Mr. Modi. India has reformed in various ways, be it labor reforms, agricultural reforms, banking laws, various things. I think in ease of doing business also.
Okay, Mr. Vishwas Pathak,
Yeah.
I understand when you're being optimistic about the future. We all want to be optimistic about the future. I don't understand when you're being extremely optimistic about what's already happened. When it comes to our country, where the economy contracted 23% in one quarter, and over a period of 2 years, our overall growth will still be only 2 to 3%. So let's not get overly excited about what the numbers are showing to us right now.
Let me correct you.
No, the projection for 11% for next year is on the basis of a very, very low base this year. So we were already in a period of slowdown of 4%. Take a look at what happens over a period of 4 to 5 years. That gives us the larger sense of just how bad things are in our economy. So you can be optimistic about the future, but let's not paint a very rosy picture about what we've gone through right now. Mr. Praveen Jha had a point. Go ahead, please.
Tanvi, this was in the context of NREGA, the numbers
Yes.
that you also shared. It is true that the BE is 73,000 crores, but look at the actual in 2019-20, that was already 71,686 crores.
Yes.
And if you look at the sort of saving role that NREGA played this year in the context of the pandemic, and then not sort of putting it somewhere close to the revised expenditure, which, as you rightly noted, is 1,11,500 crores, is a gross injustice. Where are the jobs in rural India? You have to ask these questions. Let me tell you, Mr. Spokesperson for BJP, 11, 12 and 17, 18, for the first time in India's history, rural consumption, as per the official estimate, has gone down by about 9 percentage points. 9 percentage points, whole of rural India, across different social groups and so on and so forth. Can you please factor in these things in your rosy picture and your optimism? I would also like to be optimistic for this country. Everyone would want to be, right? But please look at the very basic facts. Look at basic consumption, look at employment, and look at these challenges.
Okay, before Mr. Jha, I get a response from Vishwas Pathak. Let's just see if we can cut across to Dr. Harshvardhan.
और साथ में 12 सेंट्रल इंस्टीट्यूशंस में इस प्रकार के ब्लॉक बनाने की योजना के लिए भी प्रावधान किया गया है। जो हमारा देश का प्रतिष्ठित सेंटर है, नेशनल सेंटर फॉर डिजीज कंट्रोल, जिसने कोविड के कंट्रोल में एक बहुत बड़ी महत्वपूर्ण भूमिका निभाई है सफलता के साथ, ये प्रावधान किया गया है कि उसी प्रकार के 5 रीजनल नेशनल सेंटर फॉर डिजीज कंट्रोल की ब्रांचेस सारे देश के अंदर स्थापित की जाएंगी। 20 मेट्रोपॉलिटन हेल्थ सर्वेलेंस यूनिट्स देश में स्थापित की जाएंगी और इसके साथ साथ 17 नई पब्लिक हेल्थ यूनिट्स को ऑपरेशनलाइज किया जाएगा। 33 एग्जिस्टिंग पब्लिक हेल्थ यूनिट्स को स्ट्रेंथन किया जाएगा और 32 एयरपोर्ट्स, 11 सी पोर्ट्स और 7 लैंड क्रॉसिंग्स के ऊपर जो ये सारी हमारी टेस्टिंग की, पब्लिक हेल्थ की जो एक्टिविटीज, जिनको प्रमुखता से हमने सबने देखा कि कोविड के दौरान उनकी कितनी आवश्यकता थी, इतने स्थानों पर इनको बड़े पैमाने पर स्ट्रेंथन किया जाएगा। 15 हेल्थ इमरजेंसी ऑपरेशन सेंटर्स और 2 मोबाइल हॉस्पिटल्स, इनको आने वाले समय में विकसित किया जाएगा, उसका प्रावधान किया गया है। एक नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूशन फॉर वन हेल्थ, ये हमारा जो रीजनल रिसर्च प्लेटफॉर्म हम लोग विकसित करेंगे वर्ल्ड हेल्थ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के साउथ ईस्ट एशिया रीजनल ऑफिस के साथ मिलकर। और इससे भी ज्यादा हमारे लिए खुशी की, गर्व की बात है कि 9 BSL 3 यानी बायो सेफ्टी लेवल 3 जो लेबोरेटरीज हैं वो भी देश में विकसित की जाएंगी। ये बहुत ही प्रतिष्ठित और बहुत ही एडवांस्ड लेबोरेटरीज होती हैं। हमने सुना होगा कि जब कोविड की जंग शुरू हुई तो देश में एक ही जगह पर जांच होती थी, NIV पुणे में, नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वायरोलॉजी पुणे में। अब सरकार ने तय किया कि ऐसी 4 और रीजनल नेशनल इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ वायरोलॉजी ये देश के अंदर स्थापित किए जाएंगे.
All right. Well, Mr. Harshvardhan has his task cut out. His department has got one of the highest allocations in the last many years, ever, as the government claims. But how he really spends that money will be interesting to see. In fact, let me just bring in Mr. Sriram on that aspect. Mr. Sriram, we've repeatedly spoken about healthcare being one of those sectors that's been ignored for so long. But the allocations that have been made right now in the breakup under the healthcare sector, do you think it will help in fixing our immediate problems of lack of infrastructure?
Well, I think, Tanvi, there are a number of problems with healthcare in India, right? I mean, we spoke about it in the morning. There is a delivery problem, there is a quality problem, there is a human resource problem, there is an availability problem. I think one of your colleagues, Vinay Tiwari, mentioned about the ambulance part of it, how it is very difficult to get ambulances in several parts of the country. So I think there are a lot of issues with healthcare. What this money will do, and this money is just the money that the center is spending. So there is going to be a lot of spending that is also going to be done by the states. Now, except for the poll-bound states, all the other states will have their budgetary announcements over the next month or two. So you will get to see what are the major announcements that they are making with regards to healthcare. And all these announcements, when they come through, and if you look at how the money is going to be spent, I think you will see a fairly substantive, hopefully, a fairly substantive increase in the healthcare infrastructure in the country. As far as the quality of services, the dependability, the availability, the way in which it is spread out and distributed, and the way in which the poorer and the sections of society are benefited, the way you're getting the healthcare facilities even in the hinterland, all that remains to be seen. But I think it's a lesson well learned. We realized last year that we need to ramp up spending on healthcare, and we decided to do that. And I think over the next few years, you are going to see a fairly large stepped up increase in healthcare infrastructure, and how much that goes to solving the problem. And also, again, the point that was again made in the morning regarding non-communicable diseases and how we are, as a population, suffering from lifestyle diseases. Well, that is a very big issue. I mean, that is not an issue that is going to be resolved only through increase in healthcare spending and increase in healthcare infrastructure. It's going to require a radical change in lifestyle and a radical change in exercise habits, eating habits, the whole works. So it's a good start. It's a good start. It's good that more money is being spent. But yeah, we have to wait and see as to how it gets utilized and what kind of an impact it has on the population.
Well, 5 regional branches for National Center for Disease Control, 17 new public health units to be operationalized, 33 public health units will also be sanctioned. Adar Poonawalla has just tweeted saying, great announcements, Nirmala ji, especially on healthcare and vaccines. This is the best investment any country can make. A healthier India is a more productive India. A lot of it also, Vinay, many have been hoping, goes into R&D. We do say that we are the pharma's hub for the world, but we still need to do a lot more in terms of investing in research and creating those kind of facilities to give us that edge.
Yes, I mean, look, there are 2 cliches that are very often used about Indian medical health infrastructure, which sometimes get my goat. I mean, with my due apologies to Mr. Vishwas Pathak, it's not about the BJP, it's just about this way in which we tend to label everything. One is that India is a destination for medical tourism, and the other is that we are the pharmacy of the world. And I'll tell you why. Because ultimately, for a person who's in his or her home and has somebody who's fallen ill, what is the first thing that you need? The first thing you need is mobility to take your patient from point A to point B, where medical health is available. That's where the first hurdle in India comes in. And I'm blaming the state governments, frankly, a little more than the central government, because having a basic ambulance service in this country should be the state government's responsibility. We don't have it. So either people transport them on their personal vehicles or on scooters or on cycles or on telas. And I'm talking of the actual India. I'm not talking of the big cities, right? So you have the first problem of mobility. Then you have a very difficult, erratic and inconsistent access to healthcare and even quality healthcare. So which is why you see that in a large number of hospitals, people are reaching in rural areas when they're in a terminal state, because it's an expensive thing for them to go from point A to point B, and by the time they reach, they're in a bad shape. So for me, it's great that we are, the hub for medical tourism. It's great that we are a pharmacy to the world, but we have some very critical basic health infrastructure issues. I mean, there are hospitals in certain districts that are catering to 4 or 5 districts around them. The specialists are available, super specialists are not available, and people have to fly in. Please go and see AIIMS in Delhi. You will find people from like 7 or 8 states who land up there on trains. That's not something that they should be needing. You really don't need to, you shouldn't be requiring to, travel halfway across the country to go for a super specialist. So it's a long-term issue, and as I've, continuously said this is not an issue that only the central government can address. The state governments have to play a big part in that, and the central government has to become the big policy framework, the guide and the mentor for the states, because a lot of states still haven't woken up to the inadequacy of our health infrastructure.
Okay, if I can just step away from this for a bit, and I seek some more clarification from Mr. Praveen Jha. Mr. Praveen Jha, I'm just looking at this agri-cess that has been announced across categories of products. And the first one where there was a bit of a controversy was on fuel. More scrutiny showed us that the government claims that while they have put in an agri-cess on petrol and diesel, they've also reduced the basic excise duty and the special additional excise duty. So they claim that the overall impact on us as a consumer doesn't change. What we pay for fuel doesn't change. Similarly, I'm looking at a proposed cess, agri-cess on gold, silver bars, alcoholic beverages, crude palm oil, apples, coal, peas, Kabuli chana, lentil, cotton, and this is agri-cess that is being put as part of the customs side. But again, the government says that because they're going to redo the basic customs rate, the overall burden on the consumer doesn't change. So what is this exercise supposed to do essentially?
Listen, all this we'll see only as things sort of evolve, that we will not change excise, we will not do anything else, etc., etc. Now, in general, I would argue that the economics of cess is a terrible economics, because cess is something which is never shared with the states, right? And then it also deprives states of the possibility of raising resources on a whole range of important things which is in their domain. So number one, if you cannot get money from anywhere else, you turn to cess. This we have seen repeatedly in the sort of with this particular government, the government before this, and so on and so forth. So this is the first point which we need to note. Second, I am not convinced at all that, if you simply look at the way prices have increased in the last, sort of several years of petrol, diesel, etc., right? When actually the crude prices had really crashed. Now, it was all through the excise and additional sort of duties and so on and so forth, right? Now, what sort of assures you or me that this will not happen? Because there is some agri-cess, right? Now, yes, we can say that let's take the government for its word and so on and so forth, but I'm not convinced of it as yet, right? So these would be my 2 points with respect to the agri-cess. Just before, when Mr. Vinay Tiwari was talking about the health kind of issues, I just want to add 1 point. It is indeed the case that in the context of the pandemic, you needed to pay a lot of attention to the health sector. But look at the budget for the National Health Mission. That has increased marginally by 2,000 crores or so. It is indeed the infrastructure where a lot of attention has been paid in the budget speech, and it will take time to unfold and so on. So all this then does not sort of give us something in the very immediate context. It will take some time to unfold, but it's a good thing. Let me certainly say that this is a good thing, that there is greater attention being paid to it. Something, Bore committee way back in 1940s had said that we should spend 2 to 3% of our GDP on health. We need to spend about 1%. So any increase there is welcome, but under what heads and so on and so forth. And this is where I think the points that Vinay made are worth considering, and we need to decode that much more carefully. Thank you.
Okay, point well taken. Quick reaction also from Ghanshyam on the healthcare part. Ghanshyam, we've had many conversations about the need to focus on healthcare, the shocking state of our primary healthcare centers, even the tertiary healthcare centers, the availability of staff, and the fact that we need a universal health scheme. Now, yes, I know many raised questions on the Ayushman Bharat scheme 2 years ago, but the government seems to be going ahead very strongly with that and only adding to that plan.
Well, Tanvi, the Prime Minister speaks about आपदा को अवसर में बदलना है. If really there was a vision in healthcare, then this government will be thinking about using this crisis, which is global, to make India a net exporter of healthcare services across the world. Healthcare is as much community subject as it is about skill and knowledge together. And we have a very young population. They could be trained in NEET exam, and we have debated about NEET exam. 16 lakh students write the NEET exam. Out of that, 70,000 students become doctors. That are the number of seats that are available. There are 15 lakh students who would not enter healthcare as a result, because there's no clear roadway for them. This government could have created programs for concentrated workforce to enter healthcare when healthcare has become both national and global need. What is lacking is the vision that they want to create in healthcare, not the allocation. The allocation is a momentary thing, and that is similar to other things that they have done. Infrastructure, for example, changing course. What jobs will infrastructure announcement in poll bounds create for a country in distress? So you cannot have it both ways. You cannot play your petty politics and please the headlines and yet expect a fundamental transformation of a country in distress. So I think it is more about their lack of vision. It's a good thing that they are doing, and I think at this point in time, India has seen a lot of heroes emerging from healthcare sector, doctors, the frontline health workers. If this government was really to double down and enhance the workforce of healthcare that is available, and next look at health infrastructure, I have always believed that people and their training and their knowledge comes first before you enhance infrastructure, and that is going to be a way forward for the country.
Well, okay, let me pick up on the point that you made and take it to Amarjit Kaur. Amarjit Kaur, yes, the allegation can be that the government is rolling out doles for poll-bound states, but which government doesn't? Which government hasn't in any kind of election year? All governments do that. At least this way, Kerala and West Bengal get some additional roads, infrastructure projects that will create some jobs.
I'm not saying other governments have not been doing. Neither I want to say that when you announce for those states which go for election, you should ignore other states. Then other states should not be ignored. And when you are talking of health conditions, then you have to look into that situation also. Then the question of unemployment, which is so severe, and job creation is need of the hour. What is happening when we, even Manrega, which became a savior point, and others have also spoken that is neglected. We were expecting something like that in urban areas also. Some job schemes for urban areas also, because unemployment is great. If there is no money in the hands of people, then how economy will revive? So on that part, this government is totally failing. They are allowing the looters to run away. Now what they have announced for 3 years, only 3 years onwards, these files will be opened for looking at those jinhone tax chori kiya. What about others before that? And what about those who are in the slab, which they are telling within that slab or more than that slab? So you allow the tax money, tax chori. Also, you reduce the gap between the corporate tax and the common man's tax. You are reducing that gap. Is it a wise decision, I should say? So I fully want to assert this thing, that the government's budget is totally for sellout of the country on the one hand side, ignoring the needs of the people who need jobs, who need money, all those people who suffered heavily. Now Mrs. Sitaraman says that 80 crore people could be given free food. The need was for more than 110 crore.
Okay.
There is a big gap. So this budget is out and out pro-corporate budget, and it is out and out against poor people, workers and farmers.
Well, I think if you acknowledge the fact that all governments look at doles in poll elections, this government is equally aware of the fact that some amount of welfare for the poor and the vulnerable in the rural areas is necessary for their vote bank politics, and that part is there. To what extent are they able to now implement it going forward is a big question. We have many questions, and we're hoping some of them will be taken by the finance minister at the briefing that she now holds at 3 p.m. A big thank you to all of the panelists who have joined us here. With their initial reactions and analysis, as we bring out more and more details now from the fine print, not just the headlines that we got from the budget speech. So stay with us here on this special coverage on Mirror Now.